Well, let's speak now to Alireza Bahadori, who joins me now live from New York. He's a geoscientist and also a seismologist at Columbia University. Welcome to TRT World. I just want to ask you if you were surprised by these two large earthquakes, and were they expected to happen in this particular area, in such a huge area? We've been describing it as from London to Paris. For your audience, well, in America, I hope I get this correct, it's from Washington to New York, the area of devastation.
First of all, thank you for having me. Well, one important thing is that this region in Turkey has not seen an earthquake this size in centuries. And the recent 7.7 magnitude earthquake is one of the largest earthquake that happened in that region in near a century. And it has actually ruptured an area that was roughly 200 to 300 miles long. So when an area experiences these large earthquakes, you are really talking about a strong shaking happening over a very long region. Therefore, the entire fault zone would have been experiencing very severe shaking. And this 7.7 earthquake is actually one of the largest earthquakes since 1939. Obviously, there have been large earthquakes in the past in the same area in Turkey. So it's not the first time this region has suffered a very strong earthquake, but it won't be the last.
It won't be the last. Can I just pick up on that very point now, just because in the last few minutes we were speaking to my colleague in Malatya, and he said he had spoken to somebody there who didn't want to go back to his 8th-story home, his home in an 8th-story flat, because of fear of another earthquake. He said there was an aftershock of 4.6. Can this happen again? Can we have a 7.6, a 7.7 earthquake again this week already, or in the near future?
Yeah, so the point here is that when you have an earthquake happening, what's happening here is that before the earthquake happens, for a long time, maybe several hundred years, there is a need for accumulation of the stress. So you are accumulating a stress on the fault zone, and then gradually through time, when the rupture happens, we have the release of energy. So now when the earthquake happens, gradually through time, there may be transition of the stress to the other segment of the fault zone. And that's why we see aftershocks happening with different magnitude. Usually the first aftershock that we would expect to happen should have a magnitude which is actually, so the magnitude is one order smaller than the actual earthquake that happened. So that's actually the main point. And the main thing here is that to understand the mechanism, we have to look under the surface of the Earth, where, especially in this specific area in Turkey, that we had two large earthquakes happen. And then the point here is that when we look at under the surface of the Earth, we have the pre-plate tectonics converging with each other in this specific location. So we have the Africa plate, we have the Arabia plate, and also we have the Anatolia plate. So this region is for sure one of the more complicated part of the world because of the several different plates interacting with each other, and therefore this region has a very, very, very complex tectonic setting.
It's incredible. So one of the most complicated regions in the world. And tell us a bit more about which fault systems cause the major earthquakes in Turkey. Is it just these three, the Africa, Arabian, and Anatolian one?
Yeah, so the thing here is that so in Turkey, especially the eastern part, we have two major faults. We have the North Anatolian fault, which is a major fault in the northern Turkey, and that one actually has experienced many large earthquakes in the past few hundred years. And then we have the East Anatolian fault, which is another major fault that runs through the area that we had the recent earthquake happen there. And then the key point here is that the stress has been building along this fault over years. So large earthquakes like the two recent ones that happened they usually happen when a big magnitude of accumulated stress during a period of several hundred years since the last earthquake is suddenly released as plates slip against each other. And that's exactly what happened in Gaziantep and also the Kahramanmaraş province. And then based on the momentum, so nodal plane analysis and estimates that were released by the United States Geological Survey, the strike-slip motion in this region happened along about 100 miles of the East Anatolian Fault. And then the same thing happened roughly 9 hours later in the Kahramanmaraş province. And that resulted in a 7.6 magnitude earthquake that occurred on a nearby fault, which is not actually part of the East Anatolian fault system. But the key point here is that it actually shows that the failure condition on adjacent faults has actually changed by the magnitude 7.7 earthquake that happened on the East Anatolian fault initially.
Thank you so much for explaining the science behind the disaster that we're seeing on a human level so badly here, which the World Health Organization has called the worst natural disaster in the region in 100 years. Alireza Bahadori, geoscientist and seismologist from Columbia University, thank you so much for your time and your expertise.